Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you today about something that most people in the modern world have dismissed as primitive, as superstition, as the relic of a less enlightened age. But I want to challenge you right now, because the moment you dismiss something you do not understand, you have not made yourself smarter. You have made yourself more vulnerable. There is a realm that exists beyond what your natural eyes can see. There is a dimension that operates beneath the surface of this physical world. And whether you believe in it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not, whether you've been educated out of thinking about it or not, it is real. It was real before you were born. It will be real after you leave this earth. And the wisest people who ever walked this planet, from ancient civilizations to tribal elders to the great prophets of Scripture, they all understood one profound truth, that the spiritual world communicates with the physical world, and that your five senses are not just doors to the material realm, they are also antennae for the invisible. I want to talk to you about smell. I want to talk to you about the olfactory dimension of spiritual perception. Because most of us, when we think about spiritual discernment, we think about vision, seeing angels, seeing visions, having dreams. Some people think about hearing the still small voice, words of knowledge, prophetic utterances. But very few people have ever sat down and seriously studied the role of smell in spiritual discernment. And yet, across every culture, across every civilization, across every tradition, both sacred and profane, there has always been this understanding that certain presences carry certain fragrances, and certain dark presences carry certain odors. This is not new information. This is ancient wisdom. But the question is whether you are willing to engage it. Now, let me be precise with you, because precision matters. I am not standing before you today to promote fear. Fear is a prison, and no intelligent person should live in a prison of fear. What I am offering you today is not fear, it is awareness. There is a massive difference between fear and awareness. Fear paralyzes you, awareness empowers you. A person who is afraid of a snake will run from every garden, but a person who is aware of snakes learns to identify them, learns to understand their behavior, learns what to do when one is present, and that awareness protects their life. So today, I am going to walk you through 7 specific smells, 7 olfactory signals, that across history, across cultural tradition, across spiritual literature, have been identified as the signatures of dark spiritual activity, the presence that many cultures call a witch. I want you to understand what a witch actually is before we go further, because the word has been so confused by Hollywood, by fairy tales, by the entertainment industry, that most people have no accurate framework for what we're actually discussing. A witch, in its most precise spiritual definition, is not a woman with a pointy hat riding a broomstick. That is a Hollywood invention designed to make you laugh, so you never take the subject seriously. In its most accurate sense, a witch is a human being who has made a covenant with dark spiritual forces for the purpose of manipulating reality, manipulating other people, accumulating power, causing harm, or accessing knowledge and ability outside of legitimate spiritual authority. A witch is an agent of the dark kingdom operating in human flesh. They can be male or female. They can be old or young. They can be well-dressed and sophisticated. They can sit in boardrooms. They can sit in pews. They can live on your street. And the reason most people never recognize them is because we have been trained to look for the wrong things. But the spirit world always leaks. Let me say that again. The spirit world always leaks into the physical world, because the physical world is contained inside the spiritual world, not the other way around. The spiritual world is the container, and the physical world is the thing being contained. So when a dark spiritual entity or a human being carrying dark spiritual energy enters your space, that darkness leaks. And one of the most common ways it leaks is through smell. Let us begin. The first smell that has been documented across cultures as a signal of dark spiritual presence is the smell of sulfur. Now, sulfur has a very specific, very identifiable odor. It is the smell of rotten eggs, of burning matches, of something ancient and underground. And I want you to understand why this particular smell is so universally associated with dark spiritual presence. Sulfur in chemistry, in geology, in nature, is found primarily in volcanic regions, in the deep places of the earth, in places of intense heat and underground activity. Biblically and culturally, the deep places of the earth have always been symbolic of the realm of the dead, the realm of darkness, the realm of that which is separated from the light. When ancient people smelled sulfur unexpectedly, not near a hot spring, not near volcanic rock, but in their home, in a marketplace, in an open field. They understood that something from that lower realm had crossed over into the physical dimension. Now here's where I need you to be precise with me. I am not saying that every time you smell something unusual in your kitchen, a witch has arrived. I am saying something far more specific than that. What we are talking about is a smell that appears with no natural explanation. A smell that comes and goes suddenly. A smell that seems to follow a particular person. A smell that occurs in the presence of specific individuals at specific moments, particularly moments of prayer, of spiritual activity, of important decisions, of covenant making. When you are in a meeting, a business meeting, a family meeting, a church meeting, and suddenly, without any natural cause, the smell of sulfur fills the room, spiritual traditions across the globe stay. Pay attention. Something dark has entered this space. Someone in this room is carrying a dark assignment. That smell is not accidental. That smell is a leaking. That is the spirit world announcing itself through the olfactory channel. Throughout history, those who were trained in spiritual discernment learned to identify this smell immediately and respond with prayer, with authority, with the spiritual tools available to them. The smell of sulfur near a person, particularly when it appears repeatedly in different locations, in different contexts, was considered one of the clearest signs that that person was operating under a dark spiritual influence or actively engaged in dark spiritual practice. The second smell is the smell of decay, the smell of death and rotting matter. And this one is perhaps the most disturbing of all because it is the most visceral. There is something in the human body that is hardwired to recoil from the smell of death. This is not learned behavior. Even newborn animals respond to it. The smell of decay, of rotting flesh, of something dead and decomposing triggers a primal alarm in every human being at the level of their DNA. But what I want to tell you is this, that alarm exists for a reason that goes beyond mere physical danger. Yes, in the natural world, the smell of decay signals the presence of bacteria, of disease, of contamination. But in the spiritual world, that same smell is the signature of death working through a human being. A witch, someone operating under dark spiritual power, in many traditions carries with them an olfactory marker of death. Why? Because the power they are accessing is the power of destruction. The energy they are channeling is the energy of termination, of endings, of things ceasing to exist. And death has a smell. It is not metaphorical. It is not poetic. In the spirit world, death has a literal fragrance. And when a person who has made covenant with the power of death walks into your life, into your home, into your family, you may literally smell it before you understand it mentally. This is why in many traditional African cultures, in many indigenous American cultures, in Asian spiritual traditions, when an elder smelled something like decay around a particular person, they would immediately initiate a process of spiritual investigation. They weren't panicking. They were paying attention to information that the physical senses were providing them about an invisible reality. Now, I want to challenge the educated person in this room. The educated person wants to say, well, maybe that person just has poor hygiene. And yes, that is always the first explanation to rule out. But there is a quality to this spiritual smell of decay that is different from physical uncleanness. It is a smell that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It doesn't localize to the body. It fills a space. It lingers after the person leaves. People in the same room will notice it simultaneously and look at each other because they all experienced it together and no natural cause explains it. When you smell decay in a person's presence, particularly when others smell it too, particularly when it appears in spaces where that person has recently been, do not dismiss it. Your body is trying to tell you something. The question is whether you have the framework to understand the language it is speaking. The third smell that signals dark spiritual presence is the smell of something burning, but not the clean smell of a fireplace or wood smoke. I'm talking about something different, a pungent, acrid, almost chemical burning smell. The smell of something unnatural being consumed by fire. A smell that stings the nostrils and doesn't feel like warmth. It feels like aggression. Now, in many dark spiritual practices, fire is a primary element. This is well documented across cultures. Burning candles for malevolent purposes, burning herbs and materials in rituals designed to send harm, using fire as a channel for dark invocations. And when these rituals are performed, when dark spiritual energy is generated through fire-based practices, that energy carries the olfactory signature of that burning. It clings to the practitioner. It travels with them into the spaces they inhabit. In many traditions, the smell of burning that accompanies a person, a smell that seems to come from them but cannot be explained by any natural cause, is a marker that this person has recently been engaged in dark ritualistic practice. They have been at a fire that was not a campfire. They have been in a room where things were burned for purposes that were not innocent, and the spiritual residue of that activity follows them like a shadow. This is one of the reasons why, in many cultures, a spiritual leader or a discerning elder would smell a person as part of the process of assessment. Not literally like an animal, but there was an attentiveness to the olfactory dimension of a person's presence, because they understood that what a person does spiritually leaves a fragrance on them. Light spiritual practices, prayer, worship, the presence of the holy, leave a sweet fragrance. Dark spiritual practices leave a bitter, burning, acrid one. There are accounts in literature, in spiritual autobiography, in missionary reports from every corner of the world of people walking into spaces where dark rituals had recently been performed and immediately being struck by this smell, a burning smell, with no source, with no fire, with no explanation. And those who understood these things immediately knew something dark happened here. Something was invoked here. The fire that created the smell was not a natural fire. The fourth smell is one that surprises people. It is the smell of something intensely sweet, but wrong. Not the sweetness of flowers or fruit or perfume. Something cloying. Something that is too sweet. Something that makes you feel slightly nauseous rather than pleased. An overwhelming sweetness that, instead of bringing joy, brings unease. This one is counterintuitive, and it is precisely why it is so dangerous. We are conditioned to associate sweetness with goodness, with safety, with pleasure, and dark spiritual forces, and the human beings who carry them understand this conditioning. There's a reason why Scripture warns that the enemy comes as an angel of light. The most dangerous deceptions are not the obviously dark ones. They are the ones that look beautiful, that smell beautiful, that feel beautiful, until you are already trapped. In spiritual traditions that have studied the fragrance of dark power, there is a category of presence that is specifically described as deceptively sweet. A perfume-like smell that is too strong, too insistent, that seems designed to seduce rather than to bless. And this smell is associated specifically with a kind of witchcraft that operates through charm, through manipulation, through seduction. The witchcraft of the enchanter, of the one who gains control over others through their affection and attachment, rather than through obvious force. This is a more sophisticated form of dark practice, and its olfactory signature is more sophisticated too. Not sulfur, not decay, not burning, something sweet, something that makes you want to lean in closer, something that feels intoxicating. And then when you step back, you realize that you feel slightly wrong, that something about that sweetness disturbed you even as it attracted you. That is not an accident. That is your spirit recognizing the trap that your senses were walking you into. In many traditional communities, the smell of this wrong sweetness around a person was treated with even more seriousness than the more obvious dark smells, precisely because it indicated a more cunning form of dark operation. The person carrying this fragrance was not someone who operated through obvious aggression. They operated through attraction, through charm, through getting people to trust them, to love them, to open their most private spaces to them, and then using that access to do harm. If you have ever been around someone and felt strangely drawn to them for no logical reason, and in their presence noticed a smell that was sweet, but slightly wrong, slightly too much, slightly unsettling beneath the surface of its pleasantness, pay attention to that feeling. Your discernment is functioning correctly. You are detecting the fragrance of a trap. The fifth smell is the smell of earth, but not the good smell of earth, not the smell of a garden after rain, not the rich, dark smell of fertile soil. I'm talking about something like grave dirt, something like damp, cold, underground earth, something that smells like a place where things are buried, something that smells like the inside of a place that hasn't seen the sun. This smell is particularly associated in many traditions with the category of witchcraft that works through the dead, through ancestral manipulation, through the use of grave materials, through communion with entities that are of the dead realm. It is among the oldest forms of dark practice known to human civilization, and its practitioners carry with them the literal olfactory residue of their engagement with that dark dimension. Think about what is implied spiritually here. A person who regularly works with grave dirt, who regularly visits burial sites for dark purposes, who regularly invokes entities that reside in the realm of the dead. That person has been repeatedly in the energetic vicinity of death and burial. And just as a person who works in a fish market carries home the smell of fish, a person who works in the realm of death carries home something of that fragrance. But it goes beyond the physical. In the spirit world, the smell of grave dirt around a living person is a signal that this person has a connection, an active, cultivated, chosen connection to the realm of the dead. They have opened doors between the living world and the dead world. And that connection has an aroma. It is cold, it is damp, it is underground. It smells like something that should not be above the surface of the earth. This is one of the smells that traditionally trained spiritual discerners take most seriously, because the power associated with it, ancestral manipulation, spiritual inheritance theft, the kind of curse that runs through family lines, is among the most difficult to break and among the most destructive in its long-term effects. A person who carries this smell is not merely a personal threat. They represent a conduit through which the realm of the dead can access the realm of the living. They can bring curses that have no apparent natural origin. They can create patterns of destruction that repeat generation after generation. They can steal destiny from bloodlines. If you have ever walked into a room and felt an inexplicable coldness, not physical, but spiritual, and smelled something like cold, damp earth with no natural source, be alert. Something from the realm of the dead has been invited into that space. And if you have noticed this smell repeatedly in the presence of a specific person, that is not coincidence, that is information. The sixth smell is among the most ancient marks of dark spiritual presence, and that is the smell of animal, specifically a wild predatory animal, not the smell of a domestic animal, not the smell of a farm, but something that smells like a wolf, like something large and dangerous and wild, like something that hunts. Now let me explain why this smell is so consistently documented across cultures, because without the framework it sounds absurd. In many spiritual traditions, the highest level of dark spiritual practitioners, those who are not merely dabbling in darkness, but have fully given themselves over to a dark spiritual identity, operate in what many traditions call a spirit animal or a familiar. And the most powerful of these spirits are typically predatory in nature. They are spirits of the hunt, of the stalk, of the consume. When a human being has so deeply merged with a predatory dark spirit that they carry its essence, they begin to carry its signature, including its smell. This is documented in European witch trial records, yes. But long before European witch trials, this concept was present in African traditional religion, in indigenous American spirituality, in Asian esoteric traditions. The smell of a wild predator around a human being, a smell that has no natural explanation, was considered evidence of the deepest level of dark spiritual transformation. Now, I want to be balanced with you. This is not a common phenomenon. Not everyone who smells unusual smells something like this. This particular olfactory signal marks the most advanced and most dangerous of practitioners, those who have not merely used dark power but have, in a very real sense, become it. Those who are not merely channels for dark energy, but have been substantially altered by it in ways that have begun to mark even their physical expression. The smell in this case is not subtle, it is not ambiguous, it is disturbing at the level of instinct. When you smell it on a person in a context where there is no wild animal anywhere near, your body will react with a very specific kind of alarm, not the alarm of fire or physical danger, but something more primal. The alarm of prey, recognizing a predator. The alarm of something in you, recognizing that something near you is fundamentally dangerous in a way that goes beyond normal human interaction. Trust that alarm. That is not irrational fear. That is primal wisdom. That is millions of years of survival instinct and spiritual discernment converging in a single moment of recognition. The body knows things before the mind is able to articulate them. And the smell of a predator on a human being is one of the body's most urgent messages. The seventh smell, and I have saved this one for last because it is in some ways the most subtle and in other ways the most pervasive, is the smell of something that I can only describe as spiritually not dirty, not pungent, not sulfuric, just wrong, old, airless, like a room that has been shut for a very long time, like something that was once alive, but the life has been completely pressed out of it, like the spiritual equivalent of stagnant water. This smell is the hardest to articulate, but among the most commonly reported by people who have had encounters with dark spiritual practitioners, particularly those who have sat in conversation with someone, shared a meal with someone, or spent extended time with someone who was carrying dark spiritual power. It is not an immediate assault on the senses. It is something that creeps in gradually, something that you notice after a while, and then realize you should have noticed sooner. The smell is the signature of spiritual death in a living body. It is the smell of a person whose spirit has been so thoroughly given over to darkness that the life of the spirit, what many traditions call the light of a person, the divine breath within them, has been all but extinguished. What remains is a form, a functioning human being, walking and talking and engaging with the world, but from whom the fragrance of life has departed, leaving in its place something ancient, something closed, something that smells of the absence of light. This is a deeply sobering concept, because it means that there exists a state that a human being can reach through sustained, deliberate, chosen engagement with darkness, where they have lost so much of their original divine fragrance that what emanates from them is no longer the smell of life, but the smell of its opposite. And most people who encounter this smell don't know what they're experiencing. They just feel vaguely uncomfortable. They feel slightly drained after spending time with that person. They feel like something is off, but they cannot name it. Name it. That discomfort is accurate perception. That sense of something being slightly wrong is your spirit recognizing the spiritual emptiness in the other person and recoiling from it. That feeling of being slightly drained after their presence is real. It is not your imagination. When life encounters the absence of life, life is drawn out of it. When light encounters a void, light is drawn into it. You are not imagining that some people leave you feeling depleted in ways that have nothing to do with how long you spent with them or how energetic the conversation was. Now, I have walked you through 7 smells, and I want to bring all of this together for you because information without application is merely entertainment, and I did not come before you today to entertain you. I came to inform you, to equip you, to sharpen your discernment. The question is, what do you do with this knowledge? The first thing you do is you stop dismissing your senses. Your senses are instruments of discernment. They were designed by a creator who understood that you would need them not merely for the physical world, but for the navigation of spiritual reality. When your nose tells you something, when your body reacts in a way that has no immediate physical explanation, when your spirit is disturbed in the presence of a particular person, take that seriously. Stop explaining it away. Stop apologizing for it. Stop allowing the sophistication of your education to talk you out of the most ancient and most accurate form of knowledge available to you. The second thing you do is you cultivate your discernment intentionally. Discernment, spiritual perception, is not a fixed quality. It grows with practice. It deepens with attention. People who regularly engage in prayer, in meditation, in spiritual discipline, in the active cultivation of their connection to the divine, these people have sharper discernment. Their senses are more calibrated. The signals are cleaner. The noise is lower. And the ability to distinguish between a natural smell and a spiritual one becomes more precise. The third thing you do is you respond with authority rather than with fear. Because here is the critical truth that all of this teaching has been building toward. Dark spiritual power is not supreme power. It is not ultimate power. It is not unchallenged power. In every spiritual tradition that has honestly engaged with this subject, the consistent testimony is this: that light is stronger than darkness, that life is stronger than death, that the power of the divine is greater than the power of the darkness that opposes it. A person of genuine spiritual authority who walks in the light of the divine, who has cultivated their relationship with the source of all goodness, who understands their identity and their standing in the spiritual realm, such a person does not need to live in fear of any dark practitioner. You detect the presence, you acknowledge it, you exercise your spiritual authority, you pray, you cover the space, you speak the name that darkness cannot endure. You do not run, you do not panic, you stand because you have been given the right to stand, because you were made in an image that darkness cannot ultimately overcome, because the light that is in you is greater than any darkness that comes against you from the outside. This is the final word on the subject. All of the awareness I have given you today, every smell, every signal, every marker, is not for the purpose of making you paranoid. It is for the purpose of making you prepared. A soldier who knows the enemy's tactics is not more afraid than a soldier who doesn't know them. They are less afraid because they understand what they're facing. They know what signals to watch for, and they have trained themselves to respond effectively. You were not put on this earth to stumble through spiritual reality with your eyes closed, jumping at shadows, terrified by things you don't understand. You were put on this earth to walk with authority, to discern clearly, to respond wisely, and to be a person through whom light enters the spaces that darkness has tried to claim. So the next time you walk into a room and something smells wrong, not just physically wrong, but spiritually wrong, don't dismiss it. Don't explain it away. Take it seriously. Pray. Ask for clarity. Activate your spiritual authority, because the fact that you can smell it means your discernment is working. The fact that you notice it means you have the capacity to respond to it. And the fact that you are here today, engaging this information, choosing to understand rather than to dismiss, that tells me that you are someone who is serious about walking through this world with both eyes open, in both dimensions at once. That is wisdom, that is power. And that, the power of genuine, practiced, spiritually grounded discernment, is the greatest protection any person can carry. Your nose knows. Learn to listen to it.